God, Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. Amen. Please be seated. Well, first off, again for last week, I'd like to apologize that we didn't have our annual Vestry meeting as we had originally planned. As I said last week, not as an excuse, but as a way of explanation. 2 weeks, and I managed to get everything done. It was one of the most productive 2 weeks of my life. But the last little piece, which was the annual Vestry report, I couldn't quite get finished. And little wonder, when I looked at the finished version of it this week, it was 32 pages long. 32 action-packed pages of all the kinds of different ministries and projects that we've been doing together, principally in the last year, although a lot of the time frame kind of stretches for about the past 18 months or so, maybe even to 2 years. So just a quick little thing about the context of Messiah, especially for those of you who are relatively new to our community. Church of the Messiah, which has been around for a long time, has been experiencing historic decline for a long time as well. The decline that we've been seeing stretches way back before, not just my time, but before Andrew Sheldon's time as well, who was my predecessor. When Andrew came and when I came, both of us saw a slight bump up in our kind of year 1, year 2 of our ministries, and then kind of the general trend continued. Little wonder, because that trend is something which is not rooted in things like charismatic preaching or excellent pastoral care or any of those kinds of things, but is actually caused by much larger demographic trends which are affecting Canadian society generally, but in fact go beyond that to North America and even the UK and beyond. We're seeing a general decline in Christendom all over, and all the churches are experiencing that. So when you come across a mainline church that's actually growing, that's either usually because, number one, they're in an area that's experiencing substantial immigration coming in from people that are basically already Christian and are looking for a church home, or they're doing something extraordinary with various forms of ministry, and they're really doing something really, really awesome and great. And frankly, even some of the churches I know that are doing some fantastic, what we call primary evangelism, that is bringing people to church for the first time, even some of those churches this last year experienced significant decline, which is really stunning and surprising in some ways. So we've been experiencing this decline for a while, and so when I came about 7 years ago, we tried a couple of strategies right away. Now, I should say, first of all, that I came to Messiah not in spite of the fact that we were experiencing this decline, but frankly because of it. I chose Messiah because I wanted a church that was ready to try some new things and ready to be innovative, and because I wanted to try to break the great challenge of the church in our era, which is facing this kind of general social shift that's been occurring. So when I first started, one of the things that we did was we doubled down on a lot of what you might call attractional approaches. That is to say, doing a lot of things that we do that attract people to the church. So we invested a lot in children's ministry, as well as in youth ministry, in worship, and in doing special events, and all kinds of things of that nature. We redid our website, we paid a lot of attention to our signage, we increased our advertising budget. We did all these different techniques to try to draw people to the church. The basic premise being that what we have here on Sunday morning is awesome. And it is. And that if people just knew how awesome it was, they would come to church too. Problem: that approach only really works with people who already have some primary experience of church in their lives. That is, what we were competing with is every other church in Toronto that was trying to attract the really awesome Christians who are just looking for a place to find to be their church home. So that approach has a limited kind of ability, but it's worth doing to some degree, but it didn't really solve our problem. So in about the last year and a half, 2 years, I started doing a lot of efforts to try to steer the Messiah ship in a slightly different direction toward doing mission. That is to say, reaching people where they are in the society that surrounds the church. That is to say, especially our immediate neighborhood. So you may recall about a year ago I came and I was to Vestry and I was so full of passion and I had these great ideas and we had done a ton of research and we had a great working team and we had a plan and we had all these projects that we were going to try. And so we've done that for the past year and we have all that material, all that learning to report back and to discuss. And that's where I was last week, was talking about all those different projects and what I learned from that. The big thing I learned was that there was a problem in the strategy that I had concocted. The strategy had been basically that what I would do is I would do mission, in a sense, though, do it cheaply. And what I mean by that, I'm not talking about financially cheaply. I'm talking about in terms of people resources, volunteer time, especially in this congregation. I would do it relatively cheaply by leveraging relationships I had with people either on the edge of this church or even outside this church, to come alongside us and help us. So the team that I created for Messiah Commons, for example, was primarily people that I had met through church planting circles or through some of these missional circles and conversations that I've been a part of. It was great that they brought a lot of energy, time, tons of time, and a lot of ideas to the table. What was hard, though, is that although we all came up with great ideas and did really good work, we couldn't really successfully connect with this congregation as much as we had hoped. So that was one. Another similar example was Elizabeth Ashima, who did the Circuit Youth Program last summer. It was a great program. It was very successful in achieving a lot of the goals that we had set for it. But again, it didn't have a whole lot of connection to this congregation. There are a few people, a few families that participated, but for the most part, the rest of the church wasn't really that impacted by that program. So we were able to get Elizabeth and recruit her, and she is a star in terms of youth ministry. And we were able to get funds, money, to pay for that, right, at the diocese, most of it. But we weren't able to somehow transform the Sunday morning kind of primary congregational experience of mission and ministry with that project, as worthy as it was. So that's what I left you with last week was, let's try to solve this problem of how we as a congregation change, how we transform into a more missional attitude. And when you see like a passage like this one that Jesus gave to us in his gospel today, it's Mark 8:31. Here we go. So he began by teaching them that the Son of Man must undergo great suffering and be rejected by the elders, the chief priests, and the scribes, and be killed, and after 3 days rise again. He said this all quite openly, etc. If any want to become my followers, let them deny themselves and take up their cross and follow me. Here's the thing. I think that sometimes we lose track of the sacrificial character of Christian ministry. We kind of want to have it all. We want to have it all. We want to have beautiful worship. We want to have great outreach programs. We want to have good coffee. We want to have a cafe church. We want to have all of this stuff. Here's the problem. We can't have all of this stuff. We are called to sacrifice some things. And I'm not quite sure what those things are just yet. But there is something that we're going to have to figure out and crack as a congregation so that we can integrate these different approaches to reaching people of ministry, mission, and worship. So instead of just having the group that gets together on Sunday morning and worships, and the groups that are doing things outside this community to reach people in our neighborhood, we need to integrate those pieces. So now, what I'm clear about is that the folks that gather on Sunday morning commit a ton of time to making this happen, and financial resources as well. So I'm not suggesting that if you all just came and volunteered more, we'd solve all these problems. What I'm suggesting is that we need to look at even how we do Sunday morning and try to reallocate some of those resources, volunteer-wise or even money-wise, that we're putting into this. And that means sacrifice. And I am not sure what sacrifice exactly yet. I have some ideas about ways to transform the way we worship, for example, to include other people that aren't here. But I want to hear from you guys, ideas and concepts. Because I think this is what we're going to work on for the next year. Because last year was all about creating new projects and learning and meeting our neighbors. And we did that quite successfully in a number of cases. Now we've got to figure out the next step. Case in point, the market, which I talked about last week, is going gangbusters. It's extremely successful. The problem is that it's almost too successful. And the people that are making it work, people like Sheena and the volunteers that work there, don't have much of a connection to this church. And the connection they have is on a bureaucratic or leadership level, not in terms of the grassroots actually making it happen. Now, when we founded the market, a number of you put in volunteer hours to make it happen. And that was great, but it was apparently not sustainable. And I hardly blame you. I mean, Wednesday afternoon, it's kind of hard to get off work and get there to set up and stuff like that. I get that. But we need to find ways to connect what the market is doing with what we're doing as a community. Otherwise, it's just going to spin off and be a great social service project that's actually not going to reach people with the gospel of Christ, which is what we're kind of in the business of doing. More specifically, I would say that we really sort of have two jobs as church. To love God with all our hearts and minds and to worship Him, and also to love our neighbor and to serve our neighbor. Those two things. And I think that generally as church, and I'm speaking beyond just us, our parish, we're really good at the worshiping God part, the loving God part. What we're not so great at, frankly, is the serving God part. And what we're even worse at is integrating those two things, so that the same people that are worshiping are also serving and vice versa. So now I want to put this on you guys. I'm doing this partly because I realize that a lot of times people don't stay for the annual Vestry meeting when a lot of these decisions are really talked about and so on. So this is your chance to sort of talk about ways that you think that we could get better at doing mission in this neighborhood. Any ideas? Or points to make, thoughts? Especially, I'd love to hear from some of the people that have been involved in some of these projects. Yeah. Chirp. Yeah, Betsy.
I've mentioned this at home, and so you know this example from a church that we know that's not Anglican and it's not in Ontario, but this church has a really strong commitment to its community and to doing mission. And once in a while, they cancel Sunday morning services and expect everyone who, under the leadership of their deacons who help them find something to do, spend Sunday morning instead of worshiping God at the church, volunteering that time in the community, doing all kinds of things, from raking leaves to painting houses to cleaning up a garden or a park or something. And I think, that's a really clear dichotomy between worship on Sunday and the nitty-gritty ministry that we have to do, but that might be that's a model that has struck me.
Yeah, I've considered that one too. Yeah. Oh, of course, I've considered it because you told me it. I listen to my wife. Others, good idea. Others.
I think so far you've started off well. What we're doing right here is something that this is where we need to start. Before we go and start creating markets and cafes and this and that, we need to first find out what is it that our congregation needs. Why do you all come here every week? What is it that drives people from Scarborough and Ajax and everywhere to come here?
But is it our needs that matter?
Well, it is, first of all, we need to find out what brings us here, right? So why do we keep coming here every week, right? That's like, in my mind, that's the fundamental starting point, right? Once we figure out why we are here, and we are fed when we are here, fed being you leave feeling great and excited, and you've got the Holy Spirit within you, you've got the Word of God spoken to you, and you can apply it to your life going through the week. Now you feel prepared to go out and speak to people in a loving, godly manner based on what we've gotten here, right? So we've established that perimeter. Have we had a conversation with regards to a congregation as to whether or not they thought a market would be a good idea, a cafe is a good idea? What are the feedback? What are the people saying here about that type of thing, right? So that's the start. Then we need to go and find out what is it that the community needs. What is it that all these people who live around these beautiful homes, what is it that they're hungry for? We did the embryonic study, and that projected who the people were, but did it really tell us what the people wanted, right? So I think that those two things, we first fix ourselves, then we find out what is it that the public needs, and then how can we deliver what the public needs to them. That's my thoughts.
Okay. All right. Let me just challenge you a little bit. We've worked really hard on both of those things for years now. The number of studies that we've done about the neighborhood, not just the embryonic study, but the number of research, the number of people that I've met with. And when I met with people in the neighborhood, the big thing that came back, first of all, was the biggest concentrated area of need in the neighborhood was definitely 250 Davenport. Everybody, the police, the city councilor, there's the people in the neighborhood, the people that work at the corner store. They all point to that building as being the number one social need in our neighborhood. Number one. Number two, when you then ask the residents of that building, what do you need? What comes back is food security. Yeah, that's their biggest headache. That's their biggest sort of thing. And then to me, that created this opportunity. It was like, ooh, food security. Well, that's something churches know how to do something about. Churches have a huge, long and established tradition of doing things like, community meals and soup kitchens and all that sort of stuff. So, okay, that's something we can work with, right? And then last year at Vestry, we talked about the market, we talked about the cafe. I mean, all these ideas were not formed just, in my mind or something. This was a consultative process. So I feel like at a certain point, you have to sort of say you've done enough research. Let's move forward with something, right? Because frankly, the clock is ticking. I've been here 7 years. And you look at our budget deficit, you look at the attendance numbers sloping downward. Like if we don't begin to do mission and ministry and just continue to do research, we'll run out of time. You know, I have had several conversations with the bishop and the archbishop as well, and their analysis is that they feel that even if Messiah is able to turn around, and that's an if for them, they're worried that we don't have enough runway to accomplish that takeoff. You know, that even if we are speeding up towards mission, that we're just simply going to run out of resources before we can actually get to sustainability, right? So that's why I'm working my damnedest, especially the last year, to try to get stuff going so that we could do some recon in force and sort of see what would actually work, right? Yeah.
The purpose of that, of my conversation, was to get you to do exactly what you've done.
Okay. Okay, because I know you've been a part of all those conversations for a long time. Yeah.
But they don't. Not everybody really knows.
Yeah, absolutely.
I have something very simple to say. When I came to Canada, I went to several different churches. One certain church, 50% of the sermons was about, talking about how they are against the gay marriage. And then, I went to a church, and all they talked about was about, human rights and this and that. And then, I went to another church, and again, I said, I don't want to hear about these things of politics. I want to hear about the gospel. That's all I want to hear, right? And when I came to find this church, I was walking to another church, and then, I heard the noise, and I said, there is a church here. I didn't even know this church was working. And I came in, right? You said, how can we put the resources in the right place, right? I think when people can see and when people can hear, we may attract more people because, what happens, I think this church is too hidden. One thing that I always looked around and I talked to before here, you were not in the church that day, and then they were asking how can we, improve that work, right, and direct resources. I said, maybe if we had a way to open the front and have the door open, and people would hear and see, just like I heard, and I didn't see, but I heard, I said, there is a church here, piano, singing. Okay, I came in very, sat here, came once, twice, and I kept coming back. Why I kept coming back? I think because of what the church does. I'm a big sinner myself, big time. And then, I really feel very good when I come to a church, right? And besides, when I was in Italy, I have mentioned this here before, I could not find anything that I really felt comfortable. First, I could not understand Italian. I went to a church, we went to a church, and the little we understood, they were talking about politics. And, I started having asthma again. And, and for some reason, why I keep coming here? I think because, I'm a big sinner. I know that. I know my mistakes. I know where they are. And the church makes me feel good, and besides, heals me from the asthma.
Yeah.
I'm supposed to be the prayer representative for this church. And like everybody else, I find prayer difficult. And I'm sure we are praying individually about this, but I really would think that if we gathered for a corporate prayer meeting about this, God is interested in what we're doing. And I think that we need to be in touch with him and find out what he wants. And, I don't know. But
and a number of us, I know a number of us have been praying quite intensely for that, including me, and I really felt it was an answer to those prayers, especially, I said that last year.
if we gathered in corporate...
Yeah. It was interesting, like 3 years ago, maybe it was 4 years ago now, something like that, I was asked to do like a Lenten quiet day of prayers for mission for the church, and like 3 people showed up. Right? And I'm not saying it's making me feel guilty, I'm just saying it as a fact that getting people together in this church, not on Sunday morning, to do something like we were suggesting, is challenging. Which is why I'm kind of putting it back on, well, what if we change Sunday morning somehow? Like, what if you want more prayers for mission? Like, what if we take something out of our current worship format in order to insert a time of prayer for mission? You know, like that's the kind of thing that I think we may be in the direction of what you're talking about. Yeah, boom and then boom.
No, I'm just thinking about how like organizations work, and when you've got groups of people, you often have a core of people who do a lot of things, and then you've got people on the edges who maybe want to do something but aren't too sure how, or they're too shy, or for whatever reason. And I've noticed this actually in my own lab as it's grown bigger. I just sort of assume that everyone's sort of taken care of, and then they'll present at lab meeting and I'll be like, oh my God, they don't know what they're doing. And so I've sort of changed my management structure to have sort of, because I'm really busy, to have someone in between who can sort of be the mom and look around and make sure everyone... Anyways, I just find that if you meet with people one-on-one and you can establish some kind of contract of what they think they could contribute, they'd be more likely to think about those things rather than in a group setting where they might not, maybe too shy or maybe just not sure where they fit in. So I guess, I don't know how to implement that, but to have perhaps one-on-one conversations with people that maybe want to be involved but aren't too sure how.
Yeah, that's a good idea. I'll tell you where I fall down as a leader is I'm often fairly good at the introductory thing of talking to somebody and getting them to commit to something. And what I'm really bad at is the follow through when things start to slip, you know. And it's that like feedback of, you know, hey, I noticed that you forgot to do whatever that you promised to do, you know. And to be honest, it's because I don't want to put them on the spot and make them feel bad. Like that's what I used to tell myself. So yeah, I need to get better at that as a leader. I'll totally own that. But you're right, though. That's a good idea. Yeah. Have the wardens help more with that. Sure.
Or designate them.
Yeah. No, that'd be good. That'd be a good idea. Yeah. We have them and then.
I'm reading a book right now, Breathing Spaces by Heidi Newmark, and I believe in that particular book, one, in terms of mission, it's clear that relationships is key. I mean, that's certainly been my learnings here thus far and also in this particular book. But I believe in this book, and I don't know exactly where, the church, Transfiguration, basically they have groups of parishioners go out into the community, and the specific purpose of these groups is to ask the people in the community, you know, have you heard of Transfiguration? Or I guess in our case, have you heard of Messiah? You know, have you heard of the things we're doing? And it's kind of put as a challenge in the sense that the groups that go out, I mean, they're obviously deeply invested. They already know what they feel is our mission. They have, and so their challenge is to be able to listen to what these outside people are saying and not to try and correct them like as they're saying it. And so basically it's kind of a challenge perhaps in humility, but it's also a challenge which is good in the sense that if you get the outside perspective of how you look in terms of and what others think of your mission, then that can give perhaps insight in terms of communication of our mission, if that's what it is, or two, if there are other priorities that are known to the community but not to us.
Yeah.
So a couple of ideas.
Yeah, that's good. And you know, our experience is that when we reach out to the community around us, we get a quite positive response. I mean, even something as basic as a couple of years ago, I think it was Mothering Sunday, and I think Brendan, got a bunch of flowers. And we gave them out to the women, but then we had some extras. So a couple of people, I think, Ben, did you do that? You guys went out on the street and you were handing out flowers to random women passing by, which was not as creepy as it sounds. And it was actually awesome. And Ben and Brendan, they came back and they were so excited about the interactions that they had with people over the simple gesture of giving them a flower, right? And it's an example of how those things, they do not, they do not go fruitless. I mean, they do create that relationship thing in that kind of moment. Same thing with the market, same thing with the cafe when we've talked to people about it. People receive these ideas quite favorably. I mean, even the cafe idea, when I talk to potentially competing businesses on DuPont, they're excited by the idea. They don't mind. They think that's great. They want to make this a thriving neighborhood as much as we do. I agree completely. Like going out there and meeting people, maybe in groups, we could organize some groups to do that. It's a good idea. Yeah, absolutely. Put that on the table.
I just reminded last week on Metro Morning, Matt Galloway was interviewing the Newman Center. Did you catch that? Yeah. The Newman Center is the Catholic center on University of Toronto campus, and because it's been so cold, they've been giving out hot chocolate between 5 and 7 around the time for evening classes as students pass by, just for free. And he was talking to them, it was the same kind of thing as what on Mother and Son, like, what compelled you to do this and why did you do this? Is they were responding to a need right at that moment. And so I think the reason the farmers market works so well is because it was really what they needed at that moment. So trying to understand, that's not always going to be a stagnant target. Like when we responded during the blackout, that was something, so if we can have a readiness to do something when those needs come, then you can potentially have a big impact.
I agree. The challenge is, though, doing those things not as sort of extra. Right, that we need somebody to come in for a couple of extra hours to do something they wouldn't normally do, but to have it kind of integrated into the way that we do things normally. So, into the very way we think. Exactly. Yeah.
I wonder if in fact, you're being able to draw in people to volunteer is in fact the problem. I mean, I think you alluded to it the other day that when you were talking about the market, you were talking about how the market became a success of its own, but that it didn't bring people in here. And I think that there is an awful lot of goodwill and an awful lot of desire for community involvement out there in the community. But I know that when I talk to a lot of people, and I struggle with this myself, I like, how do you connect good work, loving your neighbor, with God? And I think that would be the big problem. Why do we need God to be good? And how do you draw people into that discussion? And I think because if you're looking to try and bring other Christians in, well, you are competing then with other churches. But there are people out there who still have not heard the message, and I think you need to connect those good works and that love for your neighbor with the church and its works as well.
I agree. I mean, one of our targets really should be the spiritual but not religious people. The folks that we tell them that you go to church, it's, well, I'm a very spiritual person, but I'm not religious. I don't believe in the organized church. And then, if you follow up with that and you ask, okay, well, then where are you encountering God? They often say, oh, and rainbows in nature, and I'm being a little facetious, but I have a friend who's really funny about this. Lillian Daniels wrote a book about it. But anyway, the point is that there are a large number of people for whom that's true. And it feels like if we just said, you know what, we're not this sort of evil corporate thing that you think we are. We're also into sunsets and the beauty of nature. like we can meet you there, and in fact show you, new riches of spirituality that are possible. Like we can teach you prayer techniques, and we can teach you meditation, and we can show you the beauty of music, and all kinds of things, right? And doing that is definitely possible. It's one of the edges, absolutely, to work on. Agree, completely. Sorry, man. Yeah.
I have no idea what all goes on. It's my second visit here, but because of the wonderful acoustics, I'm thinking out loud now that for music teachers that are putting together their performance, or for any configuration of music to practice and perform, this for recitals would bring in parents and aunts and neighbors, teachers, and put the church on the map.
Yeah, we have done that a fair amount. There's been a number of concerts and people that have used the venue. One of our challenges for that is that we're not as close to the U of T as a lot of the venues that tend to attract the people that are kind of in orbit around the music school and so on. But the most kind of recent iteration, what you're talking about, is an idea that Sarah's been working on around creating a, how would you describe it, open mic? Do you want to just say what kind of you were thinking?
I was thinking about how to myself meet more musicians in the neighborhood and in the city, because I'm primarily a classical musician, and I know a lot of classical musicians, but I'd like to broaden that. And I thought an open mic, because there are quite a few well-attended open mics in the city, it's something that a lot of people seek out because it's fairly low pressure for for people that are essentially community or amateur musicians. So having an open mic here would be informal and bring people in that maybe we can invite back to the service. That's sort of where I was coming from.
Yeah, I think it's an excellent idea, and it piggybacks right on what you're talking about, leveraging the space that we have. All right, I'm aware that we have, again, we're kind of balancing all these different things. We have worship to continue with in a moment, but is there anyone who has sort of one last idea they'd like to share? This has been very useful. This is good information, good ideas. Yeah, Monica.
I was just thinking of Jesus and his ministry, and I'm not sure that he ministered to others with strings attached. I'm not sure that he did it in order to bring people. I don't know, but I'm just thinking of that.
Yeah, I'm with you, Monica. And in fact, that's one of the challenges. It's like, a good example is the circuit program that we ran this summer, the youth mentorship program. When we ran that program, the kind of kids we thought we were going to attract would be these like really high-functioning, busy kids doing all kinds of different crazy stuff that were like natural-born leaders, rah, 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 ready to go. What we actually got were kids with a lot of serious needs. And you can read in Elizabeth's report, kids who were dealing with mental illness. One girl had just lost her father, major grief. I mean, all these sort of issues. And so even though we didn't get as many kids as we had hoped for in that program, we got as many as we could handle in terms of the needs that were there. And, none of those kids has come back to Messiah since then, right? But that's okay, because in that time that they were here, they got excellent ministry. I mean, there was excellent church in what they were doing. They were praying together, they were reading scripture, they were learning things, they were having fun, they were serving other people. If they were doing all those things that we would qualify as church in their group. I guess my question would be, how do we continue something like that? Not necessarily to integrate into what we're doing, not necessarily make those kids come here, right? But so that they can have church in their own way. Yeah, I agree completely. Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think that's a great place to end. Yeah. So why don't we continue with our worship? We're going to have the Vestry meeting afterwards. So if you have more ideas, you can share it in that context, as well as my door's always open, and you can by all means send me an email, call, just talk to me, as well as the other wardens as well. Let's rise together and say the Nicene Creed on page 7 of your leaflet. Let us confess our faith as we